Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Venture, watching the stars drift past through the main window. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for over 200 years. It was a good life, he thought. Peaceful, safe. Nothing like the old stories his grandfather used to tell about the wars before first contact. "Captain, we're getting a message from Kepler 442b, said Amy Torres from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that still held wonder at the vastness of space. "Mayor Clark says the Harvest Festival is starting tomorrow. He's inviting us to join them." Jake smiled. The colony on Kepler 442b was one of his favorite stops. 50,000 humans living alongside 30,000 Zilani in perfect harmony. It was everything the Federation stood for. "Tell the mayor we'd be honored to attend. Set course for Kepler." Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her research station. She was studying soil samples from 3 different worlds, trying to understand how human crops could grow in alien soil. "The Zilani have been sharing their farming techniques with the colonists," she said. "The cooperation between our species there is remarkable." Commander Ryan Bell nodded from his tactical station. He was a big man with scars on his hands from his military training days. "Hard to believe our ancestors were warriors," he said. "Now we spend our time growing food and making friends with aliens." Jake laughed. "The Federation changed us for the better, Ryan. 2 centuries ago, humans were still fighting wars with each other. Now look at us. We explore the galaxy, help other species, and keep the peace." The ship jumped to faster than light speed, and the stars became streaks of light. Jake had made this journey dozens of times. The Outer Rim territories were his patrol area, and he knew every colony, every station, every peaceful world in this sector. On Kepler 442b, Mayor Danny Clark was preparing for the biggest celebration of the year. The harvest had been excellent, thanks to the partnership between human farmers and Zilani agricultural experts. The 2 species had learned from each other in ways that amazed everyone. Pete Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead as he loaded the last of the grain sacks onto his transport. His wife Carol was at home, helping their twin daughters Lucy and Emma make decorations for tomorrow's festival. The girls were 12 years old and had never known a world without the Zilani as friends and neighbors. "Dad, can Morden come to our house for dinner tonight?" Lucy asked when Pete arrived home. Morden was a young Zilani who worked in the fields with the human teenagers. He had taught Lucy and Emma how to sing Zilani harvest songs. "Of course," Pete said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "The more the merrier." Across town, Miguel Garcia was putting the finishing touches on his family's food stand for the festival. His wife Rosa had spent days preparing traditional human dishes, while their teenage son Carlos had learned to cook Zilani delicacies. The mixing of cultures had created wonderful new foods that neither species had imagined before. Dr. Helen Price, the colony's chief medical officer, was reviewing the health reports for the celebration. Humans and Zilani had different biology, but they had learned to treat both species effectively. There had not been a serious illness in the colony for over a year. Engineer Tony Martinez checked the power systems one more time. The festival would use a lot of energy for lights, music, and food preparation. Everything had to be perfect. The celebration was not just about the harvest. It was about showing the galaxy that different species could live together in peace. Elder Kethra stood in the Zilani council chamber, discussing the festival with the other elders. The old Zilani's skin glowed softly with contentment. When the humans first arrived, many Zilani had been afraid. Humans came from what the galaxy called a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there. But the humans had proven themselves to be gentle neighbors. They followed the Federation's mercy protocols. They shared their technology. They helped during the bad growing seasons and celebrated during the good ones. Elder Kethra often said that the humans had brought more joy to their world than fear. Young Morden was excited about the festival. He had been working with human teenagers all season, learning their language and teaching them Zilani customs. Tomorrow, he would perform a traditional dance with Carlos Garcia and the Johnson twins. It would be the first time humans and Zilani performed together. Back on the UES Venture, Jake Morrison reviewed the Federation reports. The galaxy was mostly peaceful these days. There were minor disputes here and there, but nothing that required military action. The Federation's diplomatic corps handled most problems with words rather than weapons. "Captain," Amy Torres said, interrupting his thoughts, "I'm picking up some strange energy readings from the edge of the system." Jake looked at the sensor display. There were faint traces of something large moving in the outer darkness, but it was too far away to identify clearly. "Probably just space debris or a small asteroid," he said. "Keep monitoring it, but don't worry too much." Lisa Grant was reviewing her research on human adaptation to alien worlds. Humans had proven remarkably flexible in their ability to live anywhere. The Federation scientists called it the Deathworld advantage. Humans could survive in places that would kill other species. But on peaceful worlds like Kepler 442b, that advantage just meant humans could work harder and help more. Ryan Bell checked the ship's defensive systems out of habit. The UES Venture was not a warship. It had light shields and basic weapons for dealing with pirates or space debris, but nothing more. The Federation had strict rules about human military capabilities. Humans were too dangerous to be allowed full access to their old warrior nature. The Mercy protocols had been established after first contact, when the Federation realized what humans were capable of. For 2 centuries, humans had followed these rules carefully. No wars of aggression, no weapons of mass destruction, no military actions without Federation approval. It had worked well. Humans had become the Federation's most trusted peacekeepers, precisely because they restrained their natural abilities. As the UES Venture approached Kepler 442b, Jake Morrison felt the familiar satisfaction of another routine patrol. Tomorrow, he and his crew would join the Harvest Festival. They would eat good food, listen to music, and celebrate the friendship between humans and Zilani. It was a perfect example of what the Federation had achieved. None of them knew that in the darkness beyond the system's edge, something was watching. Something that had very different ideas about what humans and their alien friends deserved. Something that was about to change everything. The Harvest Festival on Kepler 442b was in full swing when the sky began to change. Children were laughing as they ran between the food stands, while adults shared stories and music under the bright afternoon sun. Lucy and Emma Johnson were teaching Morden a human dancing game when the first shadow fell across the celebration. Mayor Danny Clark looked up at the sky and frowned. Dark shapes were moving between the clouds, but they were too big to be weather formations. He pulled out his communication device and tried to contact the orbital station, but got only static in response. "What do you think those are?" Carol Johnson asked her husband Pete as more shadows appeared overhead. The shapes were getting larger and more numerous by the minute. Pete squinted at the sky. He had served in the Federation Guard years ago and recognized the outline of ships when he saw them. "Those are vessels," he said quietly. "Military vessels, lots of them." Dr. Helen Price was treating a child's scraped knee when her medical scanner began beeping wildly. The device was picking up massive energy signatures from space. She looked at the readings in confusion. The numbers were impossible. No single ship could generate that much power. Across town, engineer Tony Martinez was running diagnostics on the colony's communication array when it suddenly went dead. All the orbital satellites stopped responding at once. The deep space monitoring stations fell silent. Even the basic weather sensor shut down. "This isn't equipment failure," he muttered to himself. "Someone is jamming us." Elder Kethra felt the change before anyone else. The Zilani had sensitive nervous systems that could detect electromagnetic disturbances. A terrible feeling of wrongness washed over him as he stood in the council chamber. The other elders began to glow brighter with anxiety, their skin showing patterns of fear. Young Morden stopped dancing and looked up at the sky. His large eyes reflected the growing shadows as more and more ships became visible through the atmosphere. "Carlos," he said to his human friend, "I think something bad is coming." Mayor Clark tried to broadcast a message to whoever was approaching their world. "This is Kepler 442b colony. We are a peaceful settlement under Federation protection. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came not in words but in action. Beams of red energy lanced down from the ships above, striking the communication center. The building exploded in a ball of fire, killing everyone inside instantly. War Commander Theknal stood on the bridge of his flagship and observed the colony below with cold satisfaction. The hegemony of Vaktar had been planning this operation for months. Intelligence reports had identified Kepler 442b as a perfect target, isolated, defenseless, and populated by the two species the hegemony hated most. "Begin the cleansing," he ordered his crew. "Leave nothing alive." The bombardment started without warning. Energy weapons designed to crack the hulls of battleships turned their fury on homes, schools, and farms. The agricultural domes that had taken years to build were vaporized in seconds. The market square where families had been celebrating became a crater of molten rock. Pete Johnson saw the first blast coming and threw himself over his daughters. "Get down!" he screamed, but the beam struck their home before anyone could move. The building collapsed in flames, burying the family beneath tons of burning debris. Miguel Garcia was serving food at his stand when the energy beam hit the festival grounds. The blast threw him 30 feet through the air. When he struggled to his feet, Rosa and Carlos were gone, consumed by the inferno that had been their booth moments before. Dr. Helen Price ran toward the medical center as explosions erupted all around her. People were screaming, burning, dying by the hundreds. She activated her emergency beacon and began transmitting on all frequencies. "This is Dr. Price on Kepler 442b. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack by unknown forces. They are targeting civilians. They are killing everyone. Children, elderly, everyone. Send help. Please send help." The medical center took a direct hit just as she finished the transmission. The building crumbled around her, but her message continued broadcasting on automatic repeat. Elder Kethra tried to lead his people to the underground shelters, but the hegemony ships had studied the colony's layout carefully. They knew exactly where every bunker and safe room was located. Concentrated fire turned the shelters into death traps. The old Zelani's last thought was of the human children he had watched grow up, Lucy and Emma Johnson, who had learned to sing Zelani lullabies, Carlos Garcia, who had mastered the art of Zelani cooking. They were all gone now, turned to ash and memory. Young Morden found himself trapped in the ruins of the community center. His body was broken, but he managed to activate a recording device with his last strength. "They came without warning," he whispered into the device. "No demands, no negotiations, they just started killing. Everyone is dying. The fire is everywhere. Remember us. Please remember we were here." Engineer Tony Martinez tried desperately to get the defense systems online, but the colony had no real weapons. The Federation had forbidden military installations on civilian worlds. The few security drones they possessed were destroyed in the first wave of attacks. Mayor Clark made one final attempt to negotiate. Broadcasting from a damaged emergency shelter, he offered surrender, tribute, anything to stop the slaughter. "We are civilians," he pleaded. "We have no weapons, no military value. Please, we have children here. Innocent children." War Commander Theknal received the message and smiled coldly. The humans still did not understand. This was not conquest or subjugation. This was extermination. The hegemony did not want prisoners or resources. They wanted death. "Continue firing," he ordered. "Nothing must survive." The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it finally ended, Kepler 442b was silent. No building stood above ground level. No power signatures registered on sensors. No life signs remained detectable from orbit. 50,000 humans and 30,000 Zelani had been wiped from existence. Entire families, generations of knowledge, years of cooperation between species, all reduced to smoking ruins and scattered ash. As the hegemony fleet prepared to depart, a single ship emerged from behind an asteroid at the edge of the system. The UES Venture had arrived just in time to witness the final moments of the massacre. Captain Jake Morrison stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. The colony was gone. Every person he had known there, every friend he had made, every child who had waved at him during previous visits, all dead. Amy Torres was sobbing at her station, listening to the final transmissions that were still echoing through space. Dr. Helen Price's voice repeated endlessly. They showed no mercy. Remember us. Remember us. Commander Ryan Bell's hands shook as he recorded everything. His tactical training told him to analyze the attack patterns, but his human heart could barely process what he was seeing. Dr. Lisa Grant ran biological scans of the planet's surface. The readings made her sick. The hegemony had not just killed the colonists. They had used weapons that poisoned the soil, contaminated the water, and destroyed the ecosystem. Nothing would ever grow on Kepler 442b again. Captain, Amy whispered through her tears. What do we do now? Jake Morrison looked at the dead world below and felt something cold and terrible awakening in his chest. For 2 centuries, humans had followed the Federation's mercy protocols. They had been peaceful, restrained, civilized. But the hegemony had just reminded them of something important. They were not civilized because they were weak. They were civilized because they chose to be, and that choice could be unmade. The UES Venture raced through space toward Harmony Station, the capital world of the Galactic Federation. Captain Jake Morrison had barely slept during the 3-day journey. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the burning remains of Kepler 442b and heard the final screams of the colonists. Amy Torres had not stopped crying since they left the dead system. She kept playing Dr. Helen Price's last transmission over and over, as if hearing it again might somehow change what had happened. The words echoed through the ship. They showed no mercy. Remember us. Dr. Lisa Grant stared at her biological readings in shocked silence. The hegemony weapons had done more than kill. They had poisoned the planet so completely that nothing would ever live there again. Not plants, not animals, not even bacteria. It was death on a scale she could barely understand. Commander Ryan Bell reviewed the tactical data with growing anger. The attack had been planned perfectly. The hegemony knew exactly where every shelter was located, where every family lived, where every child played. They had studied the colony for months before striking. They didn't just murder them, he said quietly. They hunted them. When the UES Venture arrived at Harmony Station, Jake Morrison demanded an immediate meeting with the Federation Council. The evidence he carried was too important to wait for normal diplomatic procedures. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with representatives from dozens of species. President Veltar, an elderly Altarian with silver skin and wise eyes, listened carefully as Jake presented the recordings from Kepler 442b. The chamber fell silent as the images played on the main screen. Counselor Nethak, a tall being with multiple arms, covered his eyes when the footage showed children running from the flames. Even the warrior species like the Krillians looked disturbed by what they were seeing. This is terrible, President Veltar said when the presentation ended. A tragedy beyond words. The Federation extends its deepest sympathy to the human people. Jake Morrison stood up slowly. Sympathy? He asked. 50,000 humans are dead. 30,000 Zilani murdered alongside them. And you offer sympathy? Ambassador Frank Carter, the human representative to the Federation, tried to calm the situation. Captain Morrison, please. The Council understands your anger, but we must follow proper procedures. What procedures? Jake shouted. What procedures cover the complete genocide of a peaceful colony? President Veltar raised his hand for silence. The Federation Charter is clear, Captain. We cannot engage in military action without overwhelming evidence of ongoing threat. This appears to be an isolated incident. Dr. Lisa Grant stepped forward with her datapad. It's not isolated, she said firmly. My analysis shows they used weapons specifically designed to kill both human and Zilani. Biology. They studied us, they planned this. Counselor Nethak reviewed the biological data with his team of advisors. After several minutes of discussion, he spoke to the chamber. While tragic, one attack does not constitute a pattern of aggression sufficient to justify war. Admiral Kate Thompson, head of Federation Defense Forces, slammed her fist on her chair. She was one of the few humans in a position of military authority, and her face was red with fury. One attack? They killed 80,000 sentient beings in 6 hours. Admiral Thompson, President Veltar said calmly, "Your emotional response is understandable, but the Federation does not engage in wars of revenge. We are a civilization based on law and order." Jake Morrison felt something cold settling in his stomach. "So what will you do?" "We will impose economic sanctions on the hegemony," the president announced. "We will file diplomatic protests. We will demand they answer for their crimes through proper legal channels." "And if they ignore you?" Jake asked. "Then we will consider stronger measures," Counselor Nethak replied, "but only after exhausting all peaceful options." Ambassador Carter stepped forward. "The human delegation formally requests permission to deploy Earth's defense fleet to protect our remaining colonies." The request was denied almost immediately. "Human military capabilities are too dangerous to be deployed without Federation oversight," President Veltar explained. "The Mercy protocols exist for good reason." Jake Morrison stared at the alien leaders in disbelief. "You're going to let them do this again?" "We will not let our emotions drive us to become the very monsters we claim to oppose," the president replied. That night, Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the UES Venture and composed a message to Earth. His hands shook as he recorded the words that would change everything. "This is Captain Jake Morrison reporting from Harmony Station. The Federation Council has reviewed the evidence of the Kepler 442b massacre. Their response is economic sanctions and diplomatic protests. They have denied our request to deploy defensive fleets to protect our colonies." He paused, thinking of Lucy and Emma Johnson, who had taught Zelani children to sing human songs, of Carlos Garcia, who had learned to cook alien food for his friends, of all the innocent people who had died screaming while the galaxy's protectors debated proper procedures. "The Federation has abandoned us," he continued. "They care more about their laws than our lives. They will not act until millions more are dead, and maybe not even then. We need to decide what matters more, being good Federation citizens or being alive humans." The message reached Earth within hours. It spread through human space like wildfire, carried by communication networks, news services, and personal messages between families. On every human world, people gathered to watch the recordings from Kepler 442b and listen to Jake Morrison's words. Meanwhile, intelligence reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Agent Cody Smith, working deep undercover in hegemony, space, sent urgent warnings. The Vactar fleets were mobilizing near 3 more Federation worlds. All of them had large human populations. Analyst Jenny Wong intercepted hegemony communications that made everything clear. The aliens were implementing something they called the Final Solution Protocol, the systematic extermination of all Federation species, starting with the most dangerous ones, starting with humans. The intercepted messages were chilling in their clarity. "The Deathworlders are the greatest threat to hegemony expansion," one communication read. "Once they are eliminated, the other Federation species will fall easily." Another message was even more direct. "Phase 1 is complete. Kepler 442b colony destroyed with 0 survivors. Phase 2 will target the human worlds of New Boston, Terra Nova, and Riverside Colony. Estimated time to total human extinction, 18 months. When this intelligence reached the Federation Council, their response was predictable. They formed a committee to study the threat. They scheduled diplomatic meetings that would not take place for months. They debated the proper way to respond to genocide while more humans prepared to die. President Veltar called for calm and restraint. "We must not allow fear to drive us to hasty decisions," he announced. "The Federation has maintained peace for centuries through careful deliberation and measured responses." But on Earth, President Nancy Davis was reading very different reports. Human colonies across the Outer Rim were reporting suspicious ship movements. Long-range sensors were detecting massive energy buildups in hegemony space. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. The hegemony was not done killing. They were just getting started. That night, as Jake Morrison prepared to return to patrol duties with orders to avoid hegemony space, he received a personal message from Admiral Kate Thompson. She had resigned from Federation service and was returning to Earth. "They tied our hands," her message said. They would rather see us die as civilized victims than live as warriors. But I remember what humans are capable of when we stop being civilized. It's time to remind the galaxy why our planet is called a death world. Similar messages were reaching human commanders throughout Federation space. One by one they were making the same choice: species over citizenship, survival over law, humanity over everything else. The Federation had protected humans from themselves for 2 centuries. Now humans were about to protect themselves from everyone else, and the galaxy was about to learn why that was a very different thing. President Nancy Davis stood before the emergency session of the Terran Defense Council in the underground war room beneath New Geneva. The recordings from Kepler 442b played on every screen around the massive chamber. 50,000 dead faces stared down at the assembled leaders of humanity. "We have a choice to make," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "We can die as Federation citizens following their rules, or we can live as humans making our own." General Alex Scott, Supreme Commander of Earth Forces, activated his tactical display. Red markers showed hegemony fleet positions moving toward 4 more human colonies. "They're not going to stop," he said grimly. "Intelligence confirms the hegemony has marked every human world for extermination. They see us as the biggest threat to their expansion." Admiral Beth Rogers, commander of the Earth Fleet, stood up slowly. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. "The Federation won't let us defend ourselves. They'd rather see us murdered than risk us becoming dangerous again." Dr. Kevin White, Earth's chief expert on alien psychology, pulled up his analysis of hegemony behavior patterns. "They made a critical mistake," he said. "They think we're like the Federation sees us, controlled, restrained, civilized. They have no idea what humans become when we stop being civilized." President Davis looked around the room at faces she had known for years. Military commanders, scientists, diplomats, intelligence officers, all of them waiting for her decision. All of them knowing what it would mean. "The Federation protected us from ourselves for 200 years, she said quietly. "They taught us to be peaceful. They showed us how to cooperate with other species. They made us better than we were." She paused and looked at the screen showing the dead children of Kepler 442b. "But they also made us forget what we are. We are the apex predators of a death world. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have killed any other species. We didn't become peaceful because we were weak. We became peaceful because we chose to be." The room was completely silent. "That choice is no longer available to us," President Davis continued. "Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from Federation Military Command. All human colonies will be offered the same choice. We will defend ourselves by any means necessary." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the message went out to every human world in the galaxy. Colony after colony declared independence from Federation military authority. New Boston, Terra Nova, Riverside Colony, and dozens of others all chose survival over Federation law. Captain Jake Morrison received new orders while his ship was still docked at Harmony Station. They came not from the Federation but from Earth. Admiral Kate Thompson had been named Supreme Fleet Commander of the new Human Defense Force. Her first order was simple: "Come home. It's time to remember what we really are." The transformation began immediately. Ships designed for exploration and peacekeeping were recalled to human shipyards. Weapons that had been restricted under Federation law were brought online. The mercy protocols that had limited human military doctrine for 2 centuries were officially suspended. Commander Ryan Bell oversaw the conversion of the UES Venture from an exploration vessel into a warship. "We are not Federation peacekeepers anymore," he told his crew as they watched technicians install new weapon systems. "We're human warriors, and we're going to remind the galaxy why our planet is classified as a death world." Dr. Lisa Grant found herself reassigned to a new position. Biological warfare specialist. Her knowledge of alien biology, gained through years of peaceful research, was now being used to develop weapons the galaxy had never seen. Weapons designed by the survivors of Earth's countless disasters. They wanted to see what monsters from a death world could do, she said as she reviewed her new laboratory assignments. Let's show them. Amy Torres, no longer just a communications specialist, became the voice of human resolve. Her broadcasts to the galaxy were heard on every world, translated into every language. You called us Deathworlders as an insult, she said in one transmission. We accept the title with pride. The Federation tried to stop the human mobilization. President Veltar sent urgent messages demanding that human worlds return to Federation authority. Councillor Nethak threatened economic sanctions against Earth. The human response was swift and clear. Ambassador Frank Carter, recalled from Harmony Station, delivered humanity's final message to the Federation Council. For 2 centuries, we followed your rules and pretended to be civilized. In 6 hours, the hegemony murdered our children and reminded us what we really are. We are not your subjects anymore, we are Deathworlders, and we are done apologizing for it. The Federation watched in growing horror as the human fleet assembled. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems began converging on Earth. Military commanders who had served the Federation for decades resigned their commissions and returned to their home species. Admiral Kate Thompson stood on the bridge of the new flagship UES Retribution and watched the greatest military force in human history take shape around her. 800 vessels strong and growing every day. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and ship classes the Federation had never been allowed to see. How long until we're ready? She asked General Scott during a secured communication. Weapons testing is complete, he replied. Biological warfare systems are operational. Stealth technology is functioning perfectly. We can deploy within 72 hours. And our target? Vakun Prime, the hegemony's main military base. War Commander Theknel's headquarters. General Scott's voice was cold with purpose. The same commander who ordered the Kepler massacre. Dr. Kevin White's psychological analysis of the hegemony revealed their greatest weakness. They expect us to follow Federation rules of engagement, he explained during the final briefing. Honor, mercy, protection of civilians. They have no concept of total war. They're about to learn, Admiral Thompson replied. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a squadron of converted exploration ships, felt the change in himself and his crew. The restraint they had lived with for so long was gone. The careful consideration for alien sensibilities had vanished. What remained was something older and more dangerous. Amy, he said to his communications officer, send a message to every human ship in the fleet. What should I tell them, Captain? Jake Morrison looked out at the fleet surrounding them. Hundreds of ships crewed by humans who had chosen their species over their oaths. Warriors awakening after 2 centuries of peaceful sleep. Tell them to remember Kepler 442b. Tell them to remember Lucy and Emma Johnson, who taught alien children to sing. Tell them to remember Carlos Garcia, who learned to cook food for his friends. Tell them to remember every single person who died screaming while the galaxy debated proper procedures. He paused, thinking of the recordings that still haunted his dreams. And tell them that when we reach hegemony space, there will be no mercy, no quarter, and no survivors. They wanted to see what Deathworlders could do. We're going to show them. The human fleet set course for hegemony space. Behind them, Earth continued its preparations. Factories that had produced farming equipment now built weapons. Scientists who had studied peaceful applications of technology now designed instruments of war. The age of human restraint was ending. The age of human vengeance was about to begin. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the hegemony continued their preparations for Phase 2 of their extermination plan, completely unaware that their victims were no longer helpless prey. They were apex predators, and they were coming. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vakun system like death itself made manifest. 800 ships arranged in perfect battle formation, their weapons powered and their crews ready for war. Admiral Beth Rogers stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and stared at the hegemony's greatest stronghold. Vakun Prime was a fortress world, protected by massive orbital defense platforms and patrolled by over 300 warships. War Commander Theknel had boasted that his homeworld was unconquerable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. All ships, this is Admiral Rogers, she broadcast to the fleet. Remember why we are here. Remember Kepler 442b. Remember our children, who died screaming while aliens debated politics. Today we remind the galaxy what happens when someone tries to genocide humanity. Captain Jake Morrison received the signal aboard his ship and felt the cold fury that had been building for months finally reach its peak. Amy, open a channel to the hegemony forces. War Commander Theknal was in his command center when the human transmission reached him. He had been expecting this moment, though he was surprised it had taken so long. The Deathworlders were even more predictable than he had thought. Primitive humans, he broadcast back, his voice full of contempt. You dare challenge the might of the hegemony? Your pathetic Federation protectors have already abandoned you. Jake Morrison's response was calm and terrifying. We are no longer part of the Federation. We are no longer bound by their rules. We are humans from a death world, and you just reminded us what that means. Theknal laughed. You think your small fleet can defeat the defenses of Vakhun Prime? We have superior numbers, superior weapons, superior... You have nothing. Jake, Morrison interrupted. You wanted to see what Deathworlders could do. Watch carefully. The attack began unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of the honorable ship-to-ship combat that civilized species practiced, the humans employed tactics learned from the most violent planet in known space. Commander Ryan Bell led the first wave in ships that had been hiding in the system for weeks. They had arrived months earlier, concealed in asteroid fields and sensor dead zones waiting for this moment. The hegemony's superior sensors meant nothing when the humans were already inside their defenses. The orbital platforms were the first to die. Dr. Lisa Grant's biological weapons ate through their computer systems like acid, turning sophisticated defense networks into scrap metal. Engineer Tony Martinez, who had survived similar attacks on Kepler 442b, made sure their power systems would never function again. Platform 7 is down, Ryan reported as another fortress exploded in the darkness. Platform 12 is offline. Their entire defense grid is collapsing. War Commander Theknal watched his impregnable defenses crumble in minutes and felt the first cold touch of fear. How are they doing this? Our sensors show no ships in those positions. His tactical officer's voice shook as he replied, Sir, they've been here for months. They were already inside our perimeter when we detected their main fleet, the human. Strategy defied every rule of civilized warfare. They targeted military bases, government centers, industrial facilities, and communication networks simultaneously. There was no attempt to minimize civilian casualties, no effort to preserve infrastructure, no mercy for those who surrendered. Admiral Kate Thompson coordinated the assault from her flagship with the cold efficiency of a species that had survived countless wars. All units execute Phase 2. Begin atmospheric bombardment. Amy Torres broadcast continuously during the attack, her voice carrying across all hegemony frequencies. You showed no mercy to our children at Kepler 442b. You murdered families celebrating a harvest festival. You killed babies in their cribs and old people in their beds. Now you will receive the same mercy you gave them. The bombardment was relentless. Human ships that had been designed for exploration now rained death from the skies. Cities that had stood for thousands of years became smoking craters. Military academies where young hegemony soldiers trained were reduced to ash. War Commander Theknal tried desperately to coordinate a defense, but the humans had studied his tactics for months. Every move he made was anticipated. Every strategy countered before he could implement it. Request immediate reinforcement from all sectors, he ordered his communications officer. Tell them Vakhun Prime is under attack by human forces. The reply came back within minutes. Sir, all other sectors are also under attack. The humans are hitting 27 worlds simultaneously. Theknal stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The human fleet was smaller than his forces, but they were everywhere at once. How was it possible? Captain Jake Morrison provided the answer during another broadcast to the dying world below. You thought we would fight like the Federation, honorable, restrained, predictable, but we are not the Federation. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to survive by any means necessary. The siege of Vakun Prime lasted 18 hours. When it ended, nothing moved on the planet's surface. No power grids functioned. No communication systems operated. No life signs registered on any scanner. War Commander Theknal made one final transmission from his collapsing bunker. I offer surrender. Terms, reparations, anything you want. Amy Torres received the message and broadcast her response across the entire hegemony. You had your chance for mercy. We had 50,000 reasons to give it to you. Now we have 50,000 reasons not to. The bunker was vaporized 3 seconds later. The campaign across hegemony space continued for 6 months. Every world that had participated in the genocide faced the same fate as Vakun Prime. Every ship that had fired on Kepler 442b was hunted down and destroyed. Every official who had supported the extermination was found and eliminated. The humans fought with a thoroughness that horrified the galaxy. They did not seek conquest or territory. They wanted extinction, and they achieved it with methodical precision. Dr. Lisa Grant's biological weapons ensured that hegemony worlds would remain dead for centuries. The same poison that had been used on Kepler 442b now spread across their empire, turning once fertile planets into sterile wastelands. The Federation, watching from afar, demanded that humanity cease operations. President Nancy Davis responded, "Personally, for 200 years we followed your rules and became civilized. In 6 hours they murdered our children and reminded us what we really are. We are Deathworlders, we are apex predators, and we are done pretending otherwise." When the war ended, the hegemony of Vaktar no longer existed, not defeated, not conquered, but extinct. Every ship destroyed, every world sterilized, every trace of their civilization erased from the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of his flagship and surveyed the ruins of what had once been the hegemony's greatest world. The planet below was dark and silent, its cities reduced to radioactive craters. "Any regrets?" Commander Ryan Bell asked quietly. Jake Morrison thought of Lucy and Emma Johnson, who had died trying to hide from the flames, of Carlos Garcia, who had burned alive while serving food to his friends, of 50,000 humans and 30,000 Zilani who had committed no crime except existing. "None," he replied. "They chose extinction when they decided to genocide us. We simply honored their choice." The final broadcast went out to every world in the galaxy, carried by Amy Torres's voice across space. "This is humanity's message to all who can hear it. We offered you peace for 2 centuries. We followed your laws, respected your customs, and tried to be the civilized species you wanted us to be." She paused, letting the words sink in across countless worlds. "But we are not civilized because we are weak. We are civilized because we choose to be. The hegemony forced us to make a different choice. They are extinct. We are not. Remember this lesson and choose your actions more carefully in the future." The age of human restraint was over. The age of human dominance had begun. And across the galaxy, every species that had ever looked at Earth and called it a death world finally understood what that truly meant.